Hey guys, Kyle here with Gnarly Knives, and I want to do a cool review today of this guy here. This is the Ruike p121 Hussar. Now, this knife here I have had for probably about a year and a half or so, maybe a little more, maybe close to 2 years. I've carried this knife off and on during that time, and what really I love about this knife is it is pretty good quality for a pretty low budget. This knife goes for $30, and if you're not familiar with this knife or this brand, stick around. I think you're going to have your mind blown, because for what it is that this knife offers, I think the price on it is more than fair. I feel like if they charged $50 for this knife, it would still be a pretty good value. We'll just get into the specs real quick. So this knife is 8.5 inches overall length, and you have a 3 3/4 inch blade with a 3 3/4 inch cutting edge, and I do like that. Not usually big with like the large blank spots and stuff. I would rather just have a little more cutting edge. Now with that cutting edge, we'll make it in certain areas. A lot of places 3.5 inches is your legal limit on knives. Some places don't have that problem, so if you live there, you don't have to worry about carrying this around, or just don't be an ass and you should be fine. This is a really great knife. It is 14C28N steel, which I've been noticing is starting to become more of a budget option, especially this knife is made in China. A lot of those companies now I'm noticing are starting to go to 14C28N, which I think is really cool. My first experience with this steel is the Mora Garberg, which is the 14C28N, that's Sandvik stainless steel. And when I started noticing that they were having, the other companies and other countries are starting to use this, I think this is an awesome way to go. I really do like 14C28N. Don't think it's the best steel in the world, but I think it is a great budget steel, and it's something that I don't think twice about having in a steel. I think it's pretty cool. It seems like they might be starting to steer away a little from the HCR 13 and 14s and all those steels. Still making them, of course, but seeing them starting to switch into this steel, I think is awesome. Phenomenal, even. This knife is a flipper. I really think it's pretty cool because it's a $40 knife. It's a $30 knife, and of course they have cheaper flippers. But this flipper is also on ball bearings, and it is super smooth. The only thing with it is you do have to use a good little bit of force to put on the flipper to actually get the blade to open. But every time you flip it, it opens. Don't really have issues with it. If you kind of hit it not right well enough, it comes out only halfway. I think a lot of that is due to just the length of the blade, so it just helps swing it up into position. And it is very, very smooth, and you can just see it just glides right down. This knife, like I said, I have carried it a lot of time. I've put it through a lot of usage. I've even done a couple of carvings with it. This thing for just regular EDC tasks, it's the high saber grind, but this blade just rips through cardboard, rips through whatever you cut it. They did a really, really good job. And even too, I obviously, like whenever I get a knife, I always sharpen it. I have sharpened this knife a couple times. Pretty much just stuck with the factory bevel. I may, next time I sharpen it, bring it in just to see more of its capabilities, because it's a very slicey knife as it is. And then with putting the better edge on it, it's definitely helped that, but I want to just bring it in a little bit more and just see what else I can get out of it. But this knife, it's a tough knife. It's a heavy knife. I would put it, actually, honestly, it feels like it weighs about the same as the Ontario Rat 1. This is the D2 version, but the D2 AOS8, they both weigh the same. I have both versions. Great knives, but we'll get into it more. I have a couple knives I do want to compare this to when we get there. I have two knives that are in the $150 to $200 range that are flippers, and then I have two knives that are in this under $50 range, your budget range. Just what I consider budget is just, good knives, quality knives that are under $50. I don't think that's too unreasonable. They do you can get decent knives. I'm talking just folding knives. You can get pretty decent knives for less than that, 40, 30. You start getting 20 and below, I think you start getting a little bit tougher and tougher. Not saying they don't exist, but I feel like in that 25 to 50 range is where you really get a good oomph in quality and materials as well. And then also, just speaking on materials, we'll touch on, this is G10 handles, which is pretty sweet. So for a $30 knife, you're getting G10 handles, full stainless steel liners. They are milled a little bit, so you can imagine it's not like a brick. It's not an insanely heavy knife, but it would definitely be a bit heavier without the milling out of the liners. But this is definitely a very robust knife. I mean, it has the bearings, it is a good steel, a stainless steel. I have not had any issues with rust. This thing is really good with food prep. I love using mine. I'm not really big with kitchen knives. I love using my folders and whatever fixed blades for doing food prep stuff. And especially this having that longer blade, so 3 3/4 inches makes it great for most food prep, for cutting larger things, larger tomatoes, most apples, most, depending on how big, potatoes, what have you. It's a very slicey knife. You have a lot of cutting edge, and it gives you a lot of potential for what you can do with it in the kitchen, also in general. Especially, I had mentioned it great with slicing cardboard. But cardboard is pretty tough. It does beat up edges pretty quickly. And then, this being, I'd consider 14C28N to be a mid-range steel. It's not a super steel, but having that longer cutting edge gives you more edge that you can cut with. So, if, say, the knife was only 3 inches, it would dull fast. You're only using that 3 inches, but you just get that extra bit of length. It just gives you more edge to cut with. It is edgy. I think it's a very pretty knife. It is also called the Hussar, because this blade very much, the blade and the handle, but the knife itself very much reminds me of kind of Asian, Middle Eastern, especially with the name Hussar. It just reminds me more Middle Eastern. I'm picturing like a guy with a, like a couple hundred years ago with the scimitar and all that stuff. Because you do have the upswept blade, and you do actually get a good portion of belly. You end a good portion of flat. So you probably have about 2.5 inches of flat, and then that last, basically a little over 1.25 inches there is belly. So I mean, this just lends itself to be useful in a lot of situations. I mean, you get some knives that have, the smaller blades, so the belly takes up a good portion of it, and belly's good for certain parts, if you're doing your slicing cuts like this. But then having that flat portion, you just eat the best of both worlds, is basically what I'm trying to say here. Like I said, the knife, it is very, very smooth, and the fit and finish, I think, is really good, especially for a $30 knife. I mean, there are some things that aren't absolutely perfect with it. I mean, it's a $30 knife, but I mean, even things with, I can show you here, that blade is dead center. I don't know how well it picks up. But this knife, like I said, has a good amount of use. I've disassembled this knife at least 2 times, possibly 3, but I've definitely taken it apart at least twice. Always remain true. And the blade, too, once you get it into place, it really sticks with having no play. It does right now have a teeny little bit, but next time I take this apart, I'll throw a little Loctite in there. And when I'm talking minimal. Like, you almost can't even feel it. Like, you gotta, like, it just barely has a little bit of play, side to side. Just a teeny bit up and down. But I don't find that to be too big of an issue. I think just a little crank with the screw, especially a little Loctite, will definitely alleviate that problem. It's so smooth. I mean, like I said, I have a couple of knives that I'm going to compare it to the $150 to $200 range. Both of those knives are on bearings, and both of them are flippers. And is this the same quality as them? Absolutely not. But for everything that this knife offers and its price, it almost makes me feel bad having more expensive knives. Now, am I done buying expensive knives? No, of course not. But it's cool that they have knives out there where you don't have to spend a lot of money, especially if, say, you don't really have many or really use knives that are either flippers or on ball bearings or both. A lot of times when you find those combos, they're in higher end, more expensive knives, the $80, $100+ range. But this is a good safe bet because it does have very smooth action. It's, obviously not quite the same smoothness as the other two we'll discuss in a moment, but it's still very smooth. It has a really good action, and it's a good way that I think someone who wants to try out a bearing knife or a flipper knife or the combination of the two, I think this is a good way to go, because if you end up not liking it, you're only out $30. I mean, granted, yeah, you could sell the other knife because you're going to lose money. It's a $30 knife. Even if it's not quite what you want, it won't be a huge waste, and it might grow on you. Or you can give it away as a gift or something. It's only $30. And the price has gone down. When I bought this a couple years ago, it was $35, and the last week or so, getting ready for this video, checked it a few times, and it's been at $30. Checked it right before this video, and it was at $30. And it does come in another option. I've only seen it in two colors. This is the green one, because at the time, pretty much all my knives were just like black handles and everything, so I just want to mix it up a little bit. Now I have a bunch of knives in green handles, but this was one of the first non-black handles that I got. But this does come in a black handle, and funnily enough, the green handle one on Amazon right now is going for $30. The black handle is going for $28. So if you prefer black, you'll save a couple bucks there. But it's the exact same knife, same specs and everything, literally just difference of the G10. The knife, it's pretty comfortable. It's not the most comfortable in the hand. When you're holding it, I mean, it fits my hand well. I'm not, wishing I had more space or anything. I can definitely get my hand on there and get a good hold on it. It does have the cut in, and then with the flipper tab, so you do get good lock in. I'm not worried about riding up on the blade, and there is some good texturing on the G10, so I'm really not too worried about the knife slipping out of my hands. If, it's hot, my hands are sweating, or whatever I'm doing, my hands are wet or damp, I'm not worried about the knife slipping out of my hand. The only thing with it I am not super nuts on when it comes to the actual grip was actually, it's two things. One of them is a little more minor that can be fixed. The other one, I don't know, I'll go into in a moment, but first one is just right in the cut-ins here. It does just cut into your fingers just a little bit because it's flat, so instead of being rounded off, but that could be easily remedied with sandpaper, just very lightly. I would say if you do that, just, maybe wear a mask, or, I don't know, hold it away from your face because you don't want to be breathing in G10. Like I said, that can be easily remedied. The other thing is the pocket clip. Now, I do like the pocket clip in the sense that it, you do have a pretty, you have that loop over, basically deep ride. You only have less than 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch at most, that will poke up out of your pocket, so it still gives you can still grab it pretty easily. But because it's just, basically a 90-degree bend right here, when you are holding it, especially if you're using it for a long time, it's one of the reasons I like to do carvings with a lot of my knives that I get, because it gives me a good feel for handles. And it just, right where that bend is, it just kind of digs into the hand. If you use it for a minute or two, it's not a problem. But if you're, if you're cutting a lot of cardboard or whatever, if you, like I said, I do a lot of food prep with my knives, it can start to dig in and just be uncomfortable. It'll give you a little bit of hot spots. That, I don't know. I don't know if you can get aftermarket clips. That is something I should look into. But I guess overall it's not that big of a deal. I mean, if this was something I carried, this was the only knife I carried, it would probably bother me a little bit more. And then this doesn't have to do with comfort, but just something I've just noticed. It's not always an issue, but excuse me, the screws that hold it in place, you can see the two humps right there, or the screws, they do poke up past the liner. Now, aesthetically, that's fine. Function wise, with, like I said, with grip and comfortability, it's not a problem. But when you put it in your pocket can, I've noticed more when you're wearing jeans, stuff like that, with the reinforced pockets, where it'll want to catch sometimes. Now, because it is, pretty much all the way in your pocket by the time you get to there, I'm really not that worried, it's going to go flying out. This does have a pretty strong pocket clip, so, when I first got it, you had to really kind of force it into the pocket. It has loosened up a bit over time with use and such, but once in a while, just putting it in the pocket, I just do notice that they catch or whatever, so you just have to be a little more mindful when you're putting it in, just to make sure that it does make it all the way in the pocket, because that would suck. You don't want to lose the knife. Like I said, not super worried that I would lose it, but I'd rather not have the knife sticking up that much out of my pocket, But now getting to, like I said, the $150 to $200 range knives that I want to compare it to. Alright, so the first one I want to compare it to is the ZT-0450. Now, this is the $200 knife. I absolutely love this knife. It's my first zero tolerance. I will definitely get more. But this is super, super smooth. It's definitely smoother than this, and you don't have to use quite the force to open it. But it feels close enough. Like, the similarities with the action is close enough that I just find it to be very impressive on the Ruike. Because $30, $200. Now, granted, materials are way different. G10 you can definitely find in higher end knives. I mean, one of the Benchmade I just picked up, the 551-1 Griptilian, it's $185 knife. It has G10 handles. G10 is a great material, but I mean, you're also getting 20 CV. Obviously the fit and finish is a lot nicer, but but G10 is a really good handle material. It's probably one of my favorite handle materials, and I just think it's great that, I can see why they use it in high-end knives. Both my Spyderco Paramilitary 2s are G10, and those are 120, 30 plus knives, dollar knives, especially the S110V version. That's like $160, $170 knife. Excuse me. But you do get really good action. Like I said, not as good as that, but it's close enough that I feel like if someone didn't have a lot of experience with knives and, I handed them both, I think they would probably not notice a difference if I didn't say anything. They would probably notice that you do have to use a little more force, because I love fidgeting and playing with my knives. It does kind of dig into the finger if you're doing it a bunch of times, but that's really, I think, the only issue when it comes to the actual flipping of this knife. But the D10 is very strong, especially for how smooth it is, because that will get into the next knife I want to talk about comparing to this. But, so you can see I'm not covering anything, I'm not hitting the flipper. This is like as hard as I can, and this is not opening. But it's still pretty smooth. Because it's just one of the things I've noticed with a lot of knives. Not always. I mean, once you start getting with the higher end knives, you get those both. Where this has super smooth action, the ZT-0450, but it's not coming out. It's a lot easier to open, and it's a little bit smoother. It's a lot easier to open, and we're not going anywhere. So I'm not covering anything. It's not going anywhere. The next knife I do want to compare it to is the Spyderco Sliver Action. This is one of my favorite folding knives. This is a great knife. I love it absolutely. Flipper, it's on ball bearings. This is probably the smoothest. I would even say this is probably a little bit smoother than the 0450. At the very least, they are just as smooth, but this, oh, I just feel like you can breathe on it and it opens. But this also doesn't have quite that detent for the blade. Now, I really don't have issues with that, but I know that's something people do worry about. You don't have to worry about it with the 121 Hussar, but this one, just very lightly, you see I put very little force. See, of course, now it's not. But you breathe on it and it opens, but it makes it super smooth, so I mean, that I really like about it. But it is something where I think whatever it is they do, the production process with this, they've dialed in, and they've done things pretty damn well, in my opinion. And then, in a moment, we will compare to a couple of the blades that are in this, close to right this range, because like I said, this is a $30. The two we're going to look at are both $40 knives, as of Amazon, that I checked right before this video. But it's just that, you know, for 30 bucks you're getting action that's similar to an over $100 knife. Oh, hey guys.
I'm sorry.
That's alright.
Nice lineup up there, bro.
Thank you. See ya. Oh. Sorry about that, guys. I gotta get myself a little studio where I can do this stuff. Just my sister and brother-in-law heading out. So apologize for that. Not their fault. They didn't know. I should start putting a sign on the door, but it's also the garage everybody uses. So I'm trying to figure out a little studio thing or place where I can work and, you know, not be hindering anybody else what they're doing, and they won't be interrupting me. But, you know, I apologize. Anyway, now, this knife, like I said, you do have that, you have a lot of the similar performance and similar functions as the higher end knives. Of course, it's not a super high end knife. I mean, I feel like the way this blade is, if they made it in, say, you know, S30V, 35VN, you know, I think this would be great in something like CTSX HP. I think this absolutely would jump from being a $30 knife to probably $100 or more, just because everything else with it, it's just a very, to me, it just screams quality. If I didn't know what the steel was, and someone handed me this knife and just said, oh, take a look at it, see, tell me what you think, like, I didn't know the company name, I didn't know the steel, anything like that, I would honestly probably guess that this knife was probably around $100, if not more. You know, I don't think it would be a $150 knife or anything, but it, just for what it is, I think it's a sleeper, you know. That's the way I look at it. In the knife world, I would call this a sleeper, because or maybe like a reverse sleeper in a sense, because, you know, yeah, the steel itself isn't the most high-end steel, but, I mean, it looks, acts, and performs like a higher-end knife, but having that budget steel in there, you're able to really drop the price down. And in my experience, 14C28N I have found to be very similar to VG10. With the edge retention, they both sharpen about similar, but, you know, I've carried a bunch of VG10 knives. You know, I have another rake that's in 14C28N. I mean, of course, I have the Garberg, but that, you know, it's a fixed blade. I don't carry fixed blades when, you know, just going around town. But the performance, the edge retention, to me, is very similar. So if you are familiar with VG10, I think, and you like it, I think you will like this. Now, getting into the knives in this price under $50 range. Alright, the first one we'll talk about, we'll just jump in with the Rat 1 in D2. Now, just because we already talked about it. Now, this is a great knife. It really is. At some point, I know I've touched on it a little bit. I want to do a full comprehensive video about the Rat 1. I want to call it something like the Ode to Rat 1 or whatever. That's one I'm putting a lot of planning and thought into. I want to just do a bunch of stuff and whatever. I don't want to give any spoilers away. But the AUS 8 Rat 1, which I also have, but I wanted to use the D2 version, because the AUS 8 one is the one that's when I really first started getting into, especially folding knives, when I was like, I want to start carrying better quality knives versus just the, cheap ones you find at the store. And that really just, I went from there. Now, this knife, this is a tough as nails knife. I mean, honestly, probably compared to this one is probably even a little tougher still. The D2, it definitely holds its edge better, but the 14C28N is definitely more stainless. They both take great edges. They both perform very well, and you do have very similar. Well, you have the blades are about the same length, but the cutting edge is a little less. This is like 3 1/4, 3.5 inch cutting edge. Actually, we'll measure it right now. So the overall blade length, alright, is about 3 5/8 inches. The cutting edge, what do you know? Just over 3 1/4. Say maybe 3 5/16. But this is a $40 knife. Now, granted, the differences here I'm really thinking is, or finding for maybe that price difference is, this is D2 steel, which I consider to be a higher. I don't really consider D2 necessarily to be a budget steel. Not necessarily. Because you can get more expensive knives in D2. I mean, I have a couple that are the same price as this that you can get in D2. The Steel Wills, Modus, and Cutjack. But I also have more expensive knives that are in D2. I just feel like you don't, from everything I've noticed, with the exception of getting, straight from China or whatever, and then I know it's kind of questionable, some of the, is it D2, is it not D2? There are some people that have some videos about that, but this knife is also made in America, and this one's made in China, and I guess if you're comparing the costs of making them, they're probably about valued equally in that sense, because it probably costs them more because they have to pay their workers more and everything like that to make this knife versus in China where it probably costs them to make this knife. But you're getting a higher end steel, but it's not quite as stainless. You'll get better stainlessness with the 14C28N than you will with the D2, but you will get a little better edge retention. But then getting to the handles, you have G10 on here, and then on this I think it's glass reinforced nylon, so it's just not, it's not quite as nice, if you will. Usually you'll find this more on cheaper steels, or cheaper knives versus the G10. It is a very good knife. Given the choice between the two, though, I think I'm leaning more towards this, and I love my Rat 1s. They are, like I said, they're great knives. I think they're great beater knives. They're good tank knives, because especially for the price, I mean, you can just really do whatever the hell you want with it, and you can get them cheap, especially the AUS 8 ones. Those are under 30. You can get those for like 25, 26, 27 bucks. So they are good value, but for everyday carry, I think I definitely would take this. For not sure what I'm doing, or as like a work knife, I would probably go with this. But what's cool though is, for that still budget price, this is kind of a classy looking knife. It doesn't have the same, like this just looks like, a work knife, beat on it, do what you need, whatever. This looks like something, if you're going out, whatever, hanging out with your friends, whatever, going out on the town. This looks like a nice knife that you could throw in to kind of fit in that almost gentleman lady category. I would call this a good business casual knife versus a gentleman's knife. But it will fit many roles. But the other one I do want to compare it to also, which is also a $40 knife, and where I think this is definitely a better value, even if they were the same price, even if this was $30, I still would find this to be a better value. I value the Rat 1 in this equally, but just in different ways. The one I want to compare it to now is the M16 p121-g. This is a good knife. I do like this knife a lot. That's why I bought it. But this knife goes for about $40. It has AUS-8 steel, which is not horrible. But like we were saying with the Rat 1, I mean, you can get AUS-8 for a little bit cheaper than that. But it's a very cool knife. It's, kind of more that tactical, whatever kind of knives. You get the cool spare point. It is a cool knife. My only issues with it are really more preference things. Because it does have that secondary safety lock here. So if you try to, move the liner, if you try to move the liner lock, you can't until you disengage this. Actually, the way I do it is I use my middle finger, turn the lock, and then boom. And then too, just to, it's tip down carry only. I just prefer tip up carry, but that's just more of a preference thing. If you don't care, it won't be an issue. And this is a fairly smooth knife. It is a flipper. It's not on the bearings. It has one phosphor bronze washer, one nylon washer, which, whatever. But it's a pretty good knife. It's definitely a little lighter. Blade for blade, I'm talking this might have an 1/8 of an inch, if that, longer cutting edge. But the blades are very similar length. It does perform pretty decent. This one is definitely thinner behind the edge, but the CRKT, you could definitely, just on the stones, bring it in a bit, which I probably will do next time I sharpen this. It does open well, but just I feel like for, it costs more than this. And, again, it's the glass reinforced nylon, which, it's okay. It does have, it's a tough little knife. It does have the full steel liners. But, for $10 cheaper, you're getting a better handle material. You're getting better blade steel. And you're getting a much nicer action, like you said, with the bearings and everything. This, it opens, it performs, it functions, it's a knife. I do not think this is a bad knife by any means. I knew when I bought it, it was $40. I knew what it was and everything, But I just think, with this compared to this, I would definitely take this one. What I also might try to do too is, I haven't tried, but I've heard that when you take these apart, there is a way you can take this out without messing up the handle. So that'll be something I'll update you guys on and let you know how that goes. But overall, guys, I know we're already past the half-hour mark. I think I've just kind of accepted this is just how I am. If you guys don't mind longer videos, that's great. If you do, I'm sorry. But it just, I always know I have a lot of things I want to say and I want to cover. I just want to give everybody the best information that I have. I want everybody to basically, have my opinions and experience out there, and then you can on your own decide, either decide it wasn't worth the spit it took me to say it, or if you want to put any weight to it, that's absolutely fine. That's all up to you. But as someone, I do use a lot of knives. I sharpen a lot of different steels. I do have really good experience with all of these knives because a lot of them I've had for a few years. I'm always switching in and out of my pocket. I actually feel bad. I haven't carried either of my PM2s in probably, it's probably been 3 weeks, a month. It's probably the longest I've gone without having a paramilitary 2 in my pocket. But there's just so many other things, especially now doing this channel. I'm trying to cover. I want to get all different knives and get refamiliarized with them. But anyway, I'm just only adding to the video length. But guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you guys have any of the Ruike knives, and if you do want to look them up, this is the spelling here. It is it's mirrored, but it's Ruike. It'll also be in the title. But from everything I've understood and looked into, it is pronounced Ruike. I know it sounds or looks like it would be Rook or Ruike or Ruike, whatever. But the majority of the sources I found, it is pronounced Ruike. So I don't know. That's just what I'm calling it until someone from Ruike, if they contact me and let me know how it is pronounced, I will then pronounce it how they pronounce it. But guys, remember, please stay sharp, keep carving. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. Look us up on Instagram at Gnarly Knives. And you guys have a good rest of your day. And like I said, let me know what you guys think of the knife. If you have this, or if you have other rake knives, I will be getting more. I do have another one. It's actually pretty cool. It was actually a little more. I think it was about $40, but it's a front flipper, but the same steel and carbon fiber. But that's irrelevant. That'll be for whenever that video is. But I'd love to know your experience. Rake, from what I understand, their like mother company are owned by Phoenix Flashlights, and from what I understand, the knives are made by San Renmu, which I think is pretty cool. I don't have any San Renmu knives, but I really like the rake knives, so I'm thinking there might be some San Renmus coming our ways pretty soon. But I will keep you guys updated on that. So, like I said, have a great day. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. Keep carving, stay sharp. Peace.